It says we're live, so I'll proceed. I don't see any sound coming through. I'm going to check my own stream before I proceed because I'm not going to have a problem again where my sound doesn't come through. Okay, it's coming through. Cool. Nothing embarrassing behind me. Cool. So, yep, we're going to read about domestic life. Domestic life. The house and its belongings. And then the earth and its beginning. So the origin story of the earth, according to the Burman. All right, see if it holds up, because that sounds pretty interesting. The Burman is the most calm and contented of mortals. He does not want to grow rich. When he does make a large sum of money, he spends it all on some pious work and rejoices in that, in the thought that this will meet with its reward in his next existence. If he never amasses enough to build any great public work at any rate, he subscribes what he can and is generous. And is generous in all giving. A bountiful soil will not let its children starve, and so the Burman jogs on through a cheerful existence, troubled by no anxious cares, and free from all the temptations of ambition. His daily round is simple enough. In the morning, after his bath, he loiters about, talking to the neighbors till breakfast time, or perhaps strolling out to the corner of his paddy fields and indulges in a contemplative smoke. After breakfast, he probably dozes through the heat of the day. When the shadow begins to get long, saunters about again. A semblance of regular labor appears when the paddy is being sown on the grain reaped. But even then, no one is in the least inclined to disturb himself for the sake of rapid work. It is sufficient that you are always certain in Burma what kind of weather you are going to have. Another hot day or another wet day. It's quite as much a matter of course as the rising sun. It's quite as much a matter of course as the rising of the sun itself, and there is therefore no need to hurry operations. In case of a change, the evenings are spent ordinarily at Pue during the fine seasons, or an amicable converse over a chair root at a friend's house in the rains. Variety comes occasionally in the shape of a jolting, hilarious journey to a distant pagoda feast, or a trip down the river in the big rice boat to one of the great milling towns. And so an uneventful life passes away. The greatest ambition to see the village boat successful at the Thadwingyut race, and the village champion, cock or buffalo, triumphant over all others. Oh, the greatest desire to some really subtle judgment in that. Oh, I just made. But that's okay. The greatest excitement, the occasional visit of the English district officer, or the suspicion of a witch in that lonely house down by the spirits pool on the creek. In Upper Burma, formerly this quiet was more apt to be disturbed by the summoning of levies to serve in some special raid against audacious dacoits, or to make a demonstration against raving mountaineers. If the Myo one was a pious man, calls for reinforcement labor at digging tanks, building pagodas and monasteries, rest houses, ta zongs were likely to keep the villagers a great deal more occupied than he cared for. There can be no doubt in any patriotic Burman's mind that the state of the people, regularly taxed, though they be under British rule, is infinitely happier than it was under their king, and all but the officials and their hangers on longed for the day when the English flag was to float over all the land as far as Mogong. There could be no hope for the country where, even under a kindly king like Mindon, Ill-conditioned governors oppressed the populace with absolute impunity. Complaints were made, but his majesty could not venture to leave his palace for any great distance to inquire for himself. The gold easily dulled the senses of the highest minister uh, around the golden throne. It is little wonder then that the people kept perpetually in the lowest depths of poverty, or if not actually dying out, certainly not increasing in number. There was nothing so much indicated the popular feeling, and at the same time so irritated the Burmese government as the unceasing stream of emigrants to Lower Burma. Nevertheless, even in independent territory, the Burman preserved his light heart and buoyant disposition. No calamity is so overwhelming as to make him despond. Some year ago, a large fire occurred in Mandalay and spread with such terrible rapidity that the inhabitants of the whole quarter were unable to save anything but the clothes they wore. Some of them went the next day to the English missionary chaplain and told him of the misfortune that had befallen them, and how so completely were they rendered destitute that they had been indebted to the charity of the inhabitants of the monastery for a breakfast in that morning. The clergyman promised to do what he could for them, and saved and the same evening went along to view the site of the fire. What was his astonishment to find that the burnt out victims had rigged up a rude stage among the charred stumps of their house posts, and in default of a house to sleep in, were prepared to spend the night listening to the love making of the princess and princess, and laughing at the caustic witticism of the clown. Not a few of the jokes being inspired by the blackened surroundings. Such defiance of all the ills of fate is very characteristic, and would seem to a Burman mind the most natural thing to do under the circumstances, since it affords both distraction and amusement. If anyone has escaped the curse of Adam, it is the Burman. He does not need to earn his bread with the sweat of his brow, and riches having no attraction for him. When his patch of paddy land had been reaped, his only concern is how to pass the time, and that is not very difficult. And that is no very difficult matter where has plenty of cherry and betel nut. He can stroll along to neighbor Mong Yi, whose son has a knack for word carving, and watch him as he deftly cuts out a piece of elaborate scroll work for the roof of a neighboring monastery, or finishes off the grim features of Bailu for the English inspector of police. Next door to the Saya for the English inspector, next door to the Saya is engaged uh, on a painting, the representation of some palace scene or of some well-known event in the life of the Lord Buddha. Burmese artists do not, as a rule, paint likeness, though they are by no means unsuccessful. When they make the attempt, anyone but a high official would probably consider it a mark of great presumption and conceit to hang up a picture of himself in his house. There is, however, none of the objection to a portrait painting which is so common with some other nations. For example, the Mohammedans will not suffer likeness to be drawn for fear uh, they should demand a soul on the day of judgment, and so some actual human being might come to the left, be left out in the cold. Catlin tells us that the American Indian chief was in a state of great alarm lest his soul might be carried off with his picture. A notion of the same kind appears in the Chinese custom of getting a priest to put in the pupil of the eye, a method which often has rather a ghastly effect when the reverend gentleman is not skillful. Similarly, every Chinese-owned craft from the sampan to the English-built iron screw steamer has a couple of eyes painted on its bows in order that it may see the same way. Down in the straits and in all places where there are many Chinese, the local steamers, whoever their owners may be, are all endowed with eyes were they not so favored. No Chinaman would travel with them as a passenger, or send any of his goods aboard of them. Sorry. The Burman is not troubled with any such fantastic notions, and has no objection whatever to sitting for his portrait. Only, as King Mindon said to Yule, they prefer a flattering likeness to an exact one. It is seldom, however, that a Burman has a picture gallery in his house, and the village artist usually confines himself to vivid colored sketches for the funeral of a Pong Yi, or to be hung around the Mendip, where the great people sit to look on at the play. The drawing and perspective are naturally a little faulty, but the details are usually worked out with a very creditable skill. Thus, wandering about seeing what his neighbors are doing, with an occasional visit to the monastery to have some edifying talk with the villager may spend time very comfortably. Oftenest, however, he stays at home and waits for visitors to drop in and have a little gossip. The good wife always has a little shop in the lower part of the building. There is hardly a single house in the whole village where something is not offered for sale. A few dried fish, betel nut, and the few fresh green leaves like lime, cardamom, and a cutch, all ready for making up half a dozen coconuts, or perhaps some two-penny, halfpenny knives, looking glasses, colored tumblers, and paltry Manchester goods. Or where there are many girls about the house, a few home-made lungyeas and passos, waistcloths woven at odd times, and the loom which stand in the yard or in a corner of the veranda of every house. The stock and trade is intended more as an excuse for people to enter the house and have a talk with any idea of making a profit. Whatever money is drawn in regard as a kind of pin money for uh, is regarded as a kind of pin money for the mistress of the establishment. When the ladies of the household are in earnest about trading, they start a stall in the bazaar, and very good hands that they are driving a bargain. A more regrettable trait is the forcible character of their language when they are annoyed, but this unhappily is a characteristic of the fair sex all the world over, whether in trade or out of it. Certain it is the dames de la Hella and the Billingsgate fishwives would require all their powers of voice and vituperation to silence a bazaar maiden when she sets her mind to it. Um, there are as a general thing, two meals only in the day: breakfast at about 8 in the morning and dinner at 5 in the afternoon. There is no difference in the menu of the two meals. The staple article of food is plain boiled rice, which is piled up in a heap on a huge platter, round about which the household arrange themselves, sitting like pitmen on their heels. The curry, uh, which is taken with it, is placed in little bowls, and each one of the party has his own plate and helps himself. Knives are unnecessary, spoons and forks are celestial, chopsticks are unknown, except in the houses of a few government officials and traders in Rangoon who have had some experience of English society. Very few are able to afford curries of meat or fish. Besides that, there are not always unscrupulous people ready to disregard the law against taking life, and the material is therefore not always available. Ordinarily, the curry consists of a soup, or thin concoction of vegetables in which chilies and onions figure largely. The other ingredients are very various. Young shoots of bamboo are very delicate in their flavor, if not overpowered by too much garlic. While asparagus, the succulent stems of a number of aquatic plants and fleshy rooms are constantly used and may be seen exposed for sale in every bazaar. Tamarind leaves and those of the mangoes trees are used by the very poor. The former have a somewhat acrid taste. The latter are curiously aromatic. Along with the curry, which has always a large amount of oil and salt in it, there are a variety of condiments, notably the strongly flavored nga pea, which no Burman would consider his meal complete. Um, without which no Burman would consider his meal complete. Sometimes the big, fierce, stinging kagyin, a species of red ant, is used along with the fish paste. Excuse me. Sometimes it is fried in oil by itself. As may be imagined, that they have an acid and decidedly pungent flavor about them. Roasted turtles and iguana eggs, dried fish, and fried ginger or gourmands adjuncts. There is a particular objection to the smell of a cookery, and when anything is fried in oil or prepared so as to produce a strong savor, it is always done to leeward of the house of the house, and where the fumes may not reach any other dwellings. Such smells are believed to be productive of fever. Nothing is ever drunk at meals, but each one, when he has finished, goes to the earthenware jar full of water, which stands in a corner of the veranda, and rinses out his mouth. It is a lamentable fact that many Burmese in the low country now drink beer and spirits, but this is never done at meals, nor in the house, where indeed the wife would not allow it. It is deplorable because it is drinking for the sake of drinking, and it is never done in moderation. The tippling Burman goes to the toddy shop for his liquor, and he does not know when to stop. Brandy of the fiery description known to the British soldier as fixed bayonet or chain shot is often drunk, but the usual tipple is Old Tom. A particularly heady mixture of this with cheap beer is affected by confirmed toppers. It is contrary to the national religion, and it does not suit the national temperament. Ooh. Strong thoughts on drinking. Um, After meals, everyone smokes men, women, and children. Facetious people have declared that Burman babies blow a cloud while they are still at the breast. This is inaccurate. They never indulge till they are able to walk without needing the assistance of their hands. But their mothers give them whiffs long before that. The ordinary Burman cheroot is very mild and has really little tobacco in it. The full flavor article to be seen occasionally in London shops is manufactured entirely for English residents. The Sepa Lip, the cigar for home, the Sepa Lip is, I guess, Burman for cigar. For home consumption, commonly known as the green cheroot, is very large, from 6 to 8 inches long and about an inch in diameter, at one end tapering to slightly less at the other. It rounds a girl's mouth a good deal when she puts it in the manufacture of its chopped tobacco leaves and pieces of the stem of tobacco plant and the pith of the one, a species of euphorbia, are the chief ingredients. Very often, these are boiled with palm sugar and allowed to dry before making up. The cover is made of the leaf of the teak tree or of a tree called the tha nut, and the ends being tucked in at the point, a piece of red raw silk fastens it at the end, put in the mouth, and some broader pieces of the pith are put there to give it stiffness to the lips. The finer kinds, such as were only used in Upper Burma and the palace, are rolled up in thin white inner coating of the bark of the betel tree. The cheroot has an ash like a cinder, and usually burns holes in the clothes of the Englishman the first time he tries it. Laid down thoughtlessly on an oily mat, it is a fruitful cause of fires. All Burman ladies are adepts at rolling cheroot, and a dozen or two of them form a common present to a favorite swains. Chewing betel is something carried on simultaneously with smoking, but mostly people prefer to economize enjoyment and only chew in the interval between smokes. Chewing is hardly an exact expression, and the use of it frequently leads the experimenting Briton into the unpleasant predicament of having all the interstices between his teeth chopped up with little fragments of the nut, which, with their indescribable aromatic flavor stimulates the flow of saliva for hours afterwards. The Burman spits his nut in half and smears a little slaked lime, usually white but sometimes tinted pink or salmon colored, on the betel vine leaf, puts in a little morsel of kutch and the tobacco, and then rolls it up and stows away the quid in his side of his mouth, occasionally occasionally squeezing it a little bit in his teeth. It is as well to be very cautious with the lime and kutch, the juice of the akia katichu. The first time you make a trial, the latter especially is very astringent. One variety of the nut, called the tangu betel, has effects very much resembling intoxication. Chewing kanthi is an unlovely practice. The Burman has none of the delicacies with regard to a spittoon, which characterizes the American. And these articles require to be a very considerable size. The monks are perhaps the most persistent chewers of the good betel. Smoking is prohibited, but nothing is said about betel, and it is considered a great stimulator of the meditative faculties. Interesting. The lime used very speedily corrodes and destroys the teeth, and then the old Pong Yi has to make the scholars crush up the nuts so that they may not hurt his toothless gums. It is a common belief that no one can speak Burmese well till he chews betel. Demosthenes is said to have put pebbles in his mouth when he was practicing oratory. Interesting. Alternatively, I don't want to keep reading about their smoking habits. All right, well, the objectives. Alternate smoking, chewing, and conversation serve to pass the day, and after dinner, when the sun goes down, our village has a bath down by the well to freshen him up. Our villager has a bath down by the well to freshen him up. The water is drawn up in a bucket and simply poured over the body. Soap is never used, and particular care is taken not to wet the hair. The head is washing is a special ceremony to be gone through only occasionally, and then with circumspection. Dandies, as a rule, put a solution of rice and water on their hands every day to make it grow long, and coconut oil is also very generously used. Both sexes are proud of the length of their hair, and it is not uncommon to see it reaching below the knee and down to the ankles. The men wear it in a yang or knot at the top of the head, while the sadan of the woman is at the back of the head. Both men and women are in the habit of adding to its size by interweaving false tresses, which are easily got, seeing that everybody has black hair, and that some young members of the family is constantly getting his locks cut off his entry into the monastery. There is no more sense of shame in using the false hair than there is in improving the appearance by wearing fine clothes. At his bath, it is usual for a pious person to repeat a Pali charm over the first bucket of water, which is then slowly poured over the body. The object of this is to guard against sickness. After bathing, the Burman, if he is young, usually puts on fine clothes except in the rainy season. Then is sure to be a dramatic performance of Yane dance. Not then. There is sure to be a dramatic performance of Yane dance by the village lads and lasses, or an entertainment of some kind going on at some house in the village. The dress is very simple and picturesque. The passo is long silk cloth, 15 cubits long and about 2.5 wide. It is wound round the body, kilt fashion, tucked in with a twist in front, and the portion which remains gathered up and allowed to hang in folds from the waist, or thrown jauntily over the shoulder. The body is covered with a short white cotton jacket, over which another of dark or colored cloth is often worn. Elderly people and the wealthy of all ages, when they are paying a visit of a ceremony or going to worship at the pagoda, wear a tang mathane, a long cloth white coat open in front except as the throat, where it is tied and reaching almost to the knee. Round the head, a flowered silk handkerchief is loosely wound as a turban. The old wear a simple narrow fillet of white book muslin around the temples and showing the hair. That is called palon. The woman, tamain, is a simple piece of cotton or silk, almost square, 4 feet and a half long by 5 broad, and woven in two pieces of different patterns. This is wound tightly over the bosom and fastened with a simple twist of the ends. The openings being in front, the symmetry of the thigh is displayed in walking, but a peculiar outward jerk of the heels, which the girls acquire, prevents any suggestion of immodesty. The loose cotton jacket is happily not so well contrived to display their charms. Over the shoulders is thrown a bright silk handkerchief, the same as that used by the men for turbans. Nothing is worn on the heads except flowers twisted into the hair. Dressed in their best, the family sally forth in search of amusement. If it is a play, they will not go home till very late, possibly not till daybreak, when the yellow line of monks issuing forth in their matutinal matutinal. That's a new word of their matutinal. I'm gonna Google that. Maybe it's not a new word and I've just never seen it. Matutinal. Okay. Of occurring in the morning. Okay. Issuing forth on their matutinal tour, may meet them at the monastery gate. A country dance naturally does not last nearly as so long, though it is kept much longer than most people would care to dance. A hornpipe or even a minute. But a still more favorite form of amusement is the entertainment of saha saya, a kind of reciter of improvisator or improvisator. He is paid to come to a house, and the company invited are asked to choose a subject for him. Some of the favorite zats or incidents or an incident in history, sacred or secular. Many of them, like the cyclic poets, repeat from memory, but there are others who invent their smooth verses as they go on. Chanting, they may perform in a house or in a manda, specially run up for the occasion, or even in the open streets when a well-known Sahasaya is going to recite the Wethandaya, or Zanaka Zats, when he tells how the Lord Buddha left his father's palace to wear the yellow robe, or how he ascended to Tawendantha. A dramatic performance is often completely deserted, and the actors have no option but to follow the populace and listen to the improvisator themselves. One of the best of these Burmese dramatic writers, Yupo Mya, was also particularly celebrated as a sahasaya. He could repeat his own drama, the Wizaya Zat, from end to end, but had also a particular facility in improvising. His night amusements over the Burmese goes home to his night's amusement over the Burman goes home to sound sleep on his Danubia mat, or a coarser one if he has not got that, and rises to spend another day of the same kind. He cares nothing for the assertions that he leads an aimlessly lazy life. He has enough to live upon, and the writing of all the philosophers say the wealth only brings new cares. Out of admin water. Or replace it with some regular water. Okay. It is singular that in a country where the pagodas and temples will compare in a stately grandeur and symmetry of the form with the sacred edifices of any part of the world, and where the monastic buildings. I'm sorry. This chapter is called "The House and Its Belongings." Um, where the monastic buildings, though only constructed of wood, strike the most casual observer with their shapely beauty and wealth of decorations. It is singular where there is a taste for such edifices and abundance of the architectural skill necessary to erect them. The Burman should, in the vast majority of cases, live in the flimsiest of bamboo huts. The original cause may be found, perhaps, in the stringent regulations of the Yazagaing. In native Burma, the shape of a man's house was fixed for him by law according to the station in life. All were one-storied, save where exceptional royal favor had granted the spire-like roof to a distinguished noble or feudatory chief. Um, brick houses were forbidden, from the apprehension that the inhabitants might take it into their head to turn them into fortifications. Gilding was forbidden to all subjects, and the permission to lacquer and paint the pillars of their house granted to but a very few. It was expressly laid down that no one should have any arch over his door. This may account for the paltry and even wretched appearance of most villages, but it is undeniable that though nowadays they are very considerably more substantial, yet a rich man never by any chance thinks of building himself a grand house, and remains firmly by the unpretentious model of his ancestors. This is the more curious because will spare no expense to buy gay turbans and bright-colored pastos for themselves and costly silks for their wives. The ordinary explanation is that everyone can see what clothes you wear, while few people care to come and spy out what kind of house you live in and how you fare. But there can be very little doubt that the real reason is a survival of the idea of the old Yazagaing, as well as the fact that the long years of customs have impressed upon everybody the opinion that there are only two forms of architecture, the secular and the ecclesiastical, and no one, no matter how sure he might be that the government would take no notice of his ambitions, would brave the denunciation of the religious by adding a spire to his house, or even adorning the gable ends with carved pinnacle um, and flamboyant finials of the monasteries. Consequently, the one regular form prevails everywhere. The Burman's dwelling, then, is always shaped more or less like a marquee tent, never more than one story high to avoid the humiliating possibility of the feet of some one being over your head. The whole house stands on the posts so that the floor is 7 or 8 feet from the ground. It consists often of one or two of one room, usually, however, of two or more. And to the front of the house there is always a veranda 3 or 4 feet lower than the general level of the house, and as often as not quite open to the street or the garden, or whatever may be in the front, and always to the sky. The posts, which form the main or central part of the house, are usually 6 in number, and all have their names such as Uyu, Kya Ngan, Nyang, and Yan. The south post in the main part of the house, the Thab Ye Taing, is the best known as being always adorned with leaves and particularly marked as that in the top of which most probably lives the nat spirit of the house. A dead body, after being swathed in while waiting for the coffin, is always placed by it. A house ought never to be built till the foundation have been thoroughly dug up and shown to a soothsayer. He will determine that from the substances found whether it is a lucky place to build a house in it or not. It stands to reason that the building cannot be commenced till a have lucky day and hour have been sought out. There is considerable care to be observed in the selection of the timber. Posts are masculine, feminine, and neuter. Most posts are of equal size at both ends. Male posts are of equal size at both ends. Female are larger at the base. Those which swell out in the middle are a thet, ma, shid, without life. Tying Bi Lu, ogre's posts are largest at the top. As a general rule, it may be taken for granted that if a house is built with neuter posts, its inmates will always be miserable and unlucky. If the posts are ogres, death and disaster will attend. Male posts are easygoing and harmless. Females, on the contrary, are fortunate and leading to honor. But it may happen that the character of the piece of ground on which the house is built upsets all these generalities, so that it is necessary to get a wise man's opinion before you get your posts. The Dayton gives many instructions on the subject, and among other things mentions how a man's fortune may be calculated from the plegatit, the side pieces of the steps which lead up to the veranda, the presence of or absence of knots, and if former their positions determine and if the former their position determines the luck of the householder. Poor people use bamboo instead of wood, and make their walls of mats woven of the same substance, split up occasionally. However, they rise to the dignity of common jungle timber. Richer people make use of the invaluable teak or of pinkando, a wood almost as durable and equally expensive. While ants will attack neither of these, the walls of such houses are planked. The roof is sometimes composed of small flat tiles, but more commonly of thatch. This consists in most places in the delta of Dani, the leaves of the toddy palm, which are first soaked in salt water, a precaution which prevents insects from destroying them. Upcountry, a species of grass called theke is universally used. This style of rooting is very satisfactory in every respect, but it is cheap, easily put on, reasonably watertight, but very inflammable, and constantly is not allowed in and consequently is not allowed in any of the larger towns in the province. In the smaller stations, however, it is almost universal, and the consequence is that when one house takes fire, the sparks from it kindle all the others as a matter of course. Consequently, as an imperative measure of protection, every house is provided with a long hooked bamboo called a michete, by means of which to pull off all the thatch as soon as a fire breaks out in the neighborhood. And in addition to this, a meerkat stands beside it. This is a broad griddle or flapper kind of thing, and its object is to beat out the flames which may be caused by a spark lighting on the roof. In addition to this, in many parts of the country, pots full of water are always kept in readiness on top of the houses. When the hour of danger comes, the householder may douse his roof and so do the best for himself. In Mandalay, under native rules, some of the Pagwets and other outcasts patrol the streets all night to watch for and prevent fires as much as possible. Another kind of roofing is waket, a sort of flat tile-like construction 6 feet long by 2 feet broad, made of coarse bamboo matting. Bamboo split in half at the center and with knots smoothed away are also used. They are placed close together with the hollow side upwards, extending all the way down from the ridge to the eaves, and over these again. Or placed others with the rounded sides up, the whole presenting rather a curious appearance, but making a very serviceable roof, and not nearly so dangerous as the leaf of grass thatchings. The leaves of the other trees are also occasionally used, but the simplicity and cheapness of the Dani roofs make it by far the most prevalent in the delta, as the grass is elsewhere, notwithstanding its danger. In Rangoon and Malmine, shingles, that is, small wooden slabs like slates, are being very generally introduced. In the better class of houses, the floors are made of planking, but poor people have nothing better than a series of whole or split bamboo laid side by side on the crossing beams, and tied down with rattans. This is not very pleasant to walk on and has the further disadvantage of being anything but clean, for the space between the bamboo offers an irresistible temptation to drop all litter and garbage onto the ground immediately underneath the house. And were it not for the pariah dogs, the sanitary house, and were it not for the garbage on the ground immediately. Okay. Just finalize sentence and repeat what I was reading. Da, 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 da. This is not very pleasant to walk on and has the further disadvantage of being anything but cleanly, for the space between the bamboo offers an irresistible temptation to drop all litter and garbage onto the ground immediately underneath the house. And were it not for the pariah dogs, the sanitary conditions of the place would soon be very bad. The house is thus simple enough in its character, but furniture is still more so. Intercourse with the English has indeed brought many Burmans to indulge in English luxuries, as in many houses, in Rangoon and the larger district towns, chandeliers, bookcases, pictures, and even statuary are to be seen, besides abundance of chairs and tables and occasionally bedsteads, while clocks, kerosene lamps, looking glasses, lounge chairs are universal. But it is very difficult in the village houses that different in the village houses. There is practically no furniture at all, therefore at all there. For a chair is of no use to a jungle Burman, and without chairs, tables are equally useless. Consequently, all that is to be seen in a village house is the goodman's box, and a few woven mats and hard bamboo pillows to sleep on. Cots are not used, for one of the 10 precepts to be kept on duty days is that one must not sleep on a high place. The only furnishing visible are the mats rolled up during the day with the rugs or blankets which serve for bedding. The mats themselves are probably homemade, manufactured from fine strips of bamboo. The best being those with a polished siliceous surface outside, which stand any amount of work. Softer, finer articles are made from the skin of the feng, a species of rush, which takes a black dye and is often worked into patterns. But no one has anything more elaborate, and indeed nothing better could be wished for. A cooler bed not easily be found in the country, and the cooking place during the rains is in the house. During the fine weather, culinary operations are carried on in the open air behind the premises. The cooking range, the cooking, where was I? The cooking range is nothing more than a box, 2 or 3 feet square and 6 inches deep, filled up with earth or ashes. And on top of this, the wood used as fuel is piled. The cooking utensils and the dining services are equally simple. The former consists of nothing further than 2 or 3 earthen pots with lids to them and a wooden spurtle to stir the contents with. Close at hand is a jar full of water with a ladle, half a coconut, and with handle through it. These are all the kitchen appliances in place of a table. There is a huge round dish of lacquered wood called biat. These biats are sometimes as much as 3 feet and more in diameter, and so on. No, that's not what this says at all. These biats are sometimes as much as 3 feet and more in diameter, and on them is heaped up in a gigantic pile the rice, while the curry is served in little bowls disposed round about. A young couple have therefore no ruinous expenses when they set up a house. The inventory of effects necessarily is soon made. Outside the house, there is not much more to notice. The abundance of land allows everyone to have a courtyard of his own. In this, the farmer keeps his cart and plow, the fisherman his boat, the buffalo and oxen of the village are usually all together on pasture ground, kept by some speculative individual who charges a couple of rupees or so for feeding and looking after them. The care exercised is not great. Heat and rain kill many of them, whereas it too frequent to the case, no shelter is available. The foot and mouth disease and other epidemics carry off great numbers, and finally not at all they are not at all averse to killing one another. Consequently, the vultures are frequent to be seen on the trees round the village pasture land. Besides his implements, the house owner has always in his yard a hand rice mill. Husking paddy has become near the big towns quite a separate trade. An abundance of cleaned rice may be bought in the bazaars, but in the village every family husks his own rice. The grain, sorry, the grain being kept stored in a small granary in the yard. The milling is done by the woman, and there are two processes in this operation. The mill consists of two wooden cylinders about 2 feet thick, the inner surfaces of both roughened in a simple way by the cutting of the radii from their centers, the lines being about a quarter of an inch deep. The upper cylinder has a funnel-shaped hole cut through it. It is to let the grain down, and it is worked backwards and forwards by a long pole loosely fastened in. The rice coming out between the two cylinders and falling on mats down below. It is winnowed either in the primitive way of throwing it into the air so that the light husk may be blown away, or often nowadays in Lower Burma by a hand worked pair of fanners introduced since the English occupation. The rice is not yet, however, ready for cooking. The inner pellicle has still to be removed, and this is done in a big wooden mortar. Two varieties are in use, worked either by hand, as an apothecary pounds his drugs, the pestle being very long and heavy, or by foot, when the wooden mortar is sunk in the ground. The pestle in this latter case consists of a short, stumpy piece of wood, let into a long lever near the end. This lever is supported on two uprights at some distance from the mortar, and the machine is worked by the housewife of her daughter, stepping on and off the bars so as to raise the pestle and let it fall on the rice in the mortar. The rice is very thoroughly cleaned in this way, and Burmans prefer it to that which has passed between the millstones of the European factory. The Derbyshire or composition stones do their work only to thoroughly and remove so much of the pellicle as to take away all the flavor besides the great heat causes by the steady grinding tends to the same results. Consequently, the pleasant refrain of the girls chanting at their work may be heard all over the village after dark, and when a large quantity has to be prepared for some offering to the sacred order on a feast day, the chanted chorus rises and falls round about the homestead, often till long past midnight. Cock crow till the rising of the red star warns. Pleasant refrain. Pleasant. Consequently, the pleasant refrain of the girls chanting at their work may be heard all over the village after dark, and when a large quantity has to be prepared for some offering to the sacred order on a feast day, the chanted chorus rises and falls round about the homestead, often till long past midnight, cock crow, till the rising of the quote unquote red star warns them to retire to rest, tired but happy, for such a good work earns great merit. A sesame oil press is also frequently found in at least one house in every village. This is equally simple in its construction. It consists of a deep wooden trough in which the seeds are pressed by a heavy upright timber fixed in a frame. The weight is increased by a long lever on the end of which a man sits and guides a bullock which goes round in a circle, thus crushing and turning the seed at the same time. The carts are very strongly built and are remarkable for the way in which the floor curves upward towards the back, in the same way as the boats do. In Upper Burma, formerly, the wheels were mostly composed of one solid, roughly rounded slab of wood, or in some cases of two semicircular slabs, joined together, and these are still found, but more and more rarely in out-of-the-way places in the Upper Province. Though wheels constructed in European fashion with spokes are mostly in use, the government now prescribes a 3-inch tier on all district roads. Tire, a 3-inch tire. Is tire spelled with a Y? I've never seen that before. Okay, that's not what I wanted. Tire. Just, can I Google the word tire? Okay, yeah, I guess that's just another word for the, wait, no. A rubber covering, typically inflated or surrounding an inflated inner tube placed around a wheel. Okay, so that's just another spelling of the word tire. Okay. Trying to find my spot where I left off at. Okay, government now prescribes a 3-inch tire on all district roads. Occasionally in the old days, to save troubles, the carter started with a square wheel and trusted to time to round it out for him. I mean, okay. That's just so funny to me. Padak is the wood most valued for this purpose, but it is too expensive for most people. The wheels are never greased and make hideous screeching noises as they revolve. This serves to keep away tigers and wild animals generally when a journey is being made for any distance. At night, the carts are arranged in a lagger with the high backs outwards and all inside, including even the pariah dogs, are safe from wild animals. The wagoners used to glory in the strident sound of their wheels, which often can be heard miles off in the forest. A wheel with a creak of particular volume and power of penetration is highly prized, and an experienced driver can tell whom he is going to meet or overtake by the grounding of the axles and the key in which they are pitched. Every bullock, in addition, carries a square metal bell tied under his throat. In the yard round about the house, there is very often a little garden fenced off in a rough kind of way, but no particular care is taken to keep it neat and free from weeds. No easy matter even for a active gardener in Burma. The favorite plant is always the Boda Tharat, or Indian shot, so named from its seeds, which are used for beads of the rosary. The flowers are red or sometimes white. The fables relate that it sprang from the Buddha's blood. His impious and evil-minded brother-in-law and cousin, Dewadat, enraged that he was not allowed to have a separate assembly of his own, went to the top of a hill and rolled down a huge stone, intending to destroy the excellent Paya, but the boulder burst into 1,000 pieces, and only one little bit bruised Shin Gautama's toe, and drew a few drops of blood, whence sprang the sacred flower. The renowned physician Zewaka healed the great teacher's wound in a single day, and almost immediately afterwards the earth opened and swallowed up the sacrilegious Dewadat. Right. The plants and flowers usually stand demurely in a single row, or perhaps in 3 or 4 like a patch of peas. The Datura tatula is almost always found in among the other mingled vegetables and medicinal plants. The Celosia cristata in both its yellow and purple varieties is a special favorite, but the Burman can scarcely vaunt his success as a flower gardener. There are always a few domestic animals and pets about the premises. Every family has its dog, which trots about the establishment and makes a terrible to do whenever a white man appears. The pariahs are magnificent watchdogs. Sorry, my nose is itching, I guess. Are excellent watchdogs with their inflectional agulid, agulid, agglutinative. Agglutinative. I gotta Google that word too. Agglutinative. All right. 1 second. Agglutinative. Agglutinative. Is that agglutinative? Okay. Dogs with their uninflectual agglutinative barking. They sleep most of the day. I'm sorry, I should tell you what that means. It says forming words predominantly by agglutination rather than by inflection or by using isolated elements. For example, languages like Hungarian, Turkish, Korean, and Swahili. Um, okay. Um, They sleep most of the day, and at night gather together in bands and do their best to make up the want of jackals in Burma. There is always a huge band of unattached dogs about the village, for Buddhism does not permit of the drowning of superfluous puppies, and these manage to lead a fairly well-fed life between stealing and devouring the offerings at the pagoda, and the superabundant charity received by the monks in their morning begging rounds. It is a mystery how they managed to formerly to exist in Mandalay and Upper Burma generally. There were such constantly increasing hordes of them. Nowadays, the assistant commissioner periodically issues an edict and poison meat, and the policemen's truncheons thin out their numbers very thoroughly for a month or two. The house dog often perishes with his bohemian acquaintances, and there is much lamentation among the young members of the household, but there is no difficulty in getting a successor grown up. Successor? Why do I keep adding a B? There is no difficulty in getting a successor grown up or otherwise. The ordinary pariah has a greater turn for agility than pluck, and the young civilian's English bulldog would probably kill more of them when he is on a tour to the outlying villages with his master than he actually does. If he was as smart on his legs as he was with his jaw. The pariah is almost as noisy and quarrelsome as a madrasi, but any fights there are results in as but any fights there are result as harmlessly as a French duel. Nevertheless, some of the care-trained hunting dogs will fasten on a tiger or leopard or even more dangerous wild boar with the greatest determination. So esteemed are they that the sporting owner usually receives an official message to keep his dog in safety when the half-yearly poisoners are about. Still, though, buffalo fights and manes of cocks have been common in Burma time out of mind. The pariah has never been called upon to develop pugnacious instincts. The harmless necessary cat is not so abundant. There are, however, few villages without one or two of them. What becomes of the kittens is a mystery. They go wild and take to the woods. Perhaps the pariah eat them when their mother is out foraging. At any rate, the fact remains that they increase, but very slowly. The Burman cat is more fortunate than his Malay congener. Google that word. Then they're Malay congener. A thing or person of the same kind or category as another. Okay. The Burman cat is more fortunate than his Malay congener in possessing a tail, but asserts relationship with that animal in the possession of a horny hook, with this difference that the hard excrescence is at the end of a tail of fair dimension instead of being humbly situated on the rump, as in the case with the Straits tabby. Okay, I have to reread that sentence. It says this whole sentence is just about the cat's tails and the differences. Like I don't really care that much, but okay. With this difference that the hard excrescence is at the end of a tail of fair dimensions instead of being humbly situated on the rump, as it is in the case of the straight tabby. I'm just going to move on. I don't feel like Googling that. There are always some tame villatic fowl about the house. If the householder does not aspire to the ownership of a tyke kiet, a regular gamecock bred for the purpose, he has at least a kiet hapa, an ordinary cock of combative instincts, and backs him against his neighbors when occasion offers. Through the absence of the constable by chance or by the influence of pecuniary profit acting on a sporting disposition, a cock that declines to fight under any circumstance is called a kiet nyang gan, and stands in great danger of dying suddenly and being converted into curry. Hens are regarded with indifference except in view of similar possibilities, for their eggs are of no use. A fowl may be killed by accident by a stick thrown at random, but the germ of life in an egg cannot die unless it is boiled or goes rotten. In the former case, the boiler incurs mortal danger from breaking one of the 5 precepts. In the latter, the egg is undesirable. In small villages, almost everyone keeps a tiaget, a decoy cock for luring the wild jungle fowl. The foredoomed hunter kills the game, and the pious owner of the decoy bird gets a good dinner. Similarly, tagyo pigeons are bred specially as lures, and so are partridges. Ordinary pigeons, occasionally used for the same purpose, go by the name gyo ta nyin. Caged birds are not very common as pets, though. Every here and there, one comes across a hill mina who has acquired a fair knowledge of the vernacular and astonishes passersby with the unceremonious way in which he hails them. But the Buddhist religion condemns keeping animals in confinement. So much is the case that in Mandalay and here and there in other places there are men who make a regular living by catching birds and selling them to the pious, that they may gain merit by setting them free. Crafty bird catchers are able so far to disable the bird without doing it any material or visible harm that they can catch it again immediately after their tender-hearted customer has gone his way. This is so silly. It is used to be a common thing in the palace during the late king's reign to let loose a number of birds for the delectation of foreign worshippers at the Golden Feet and the expansion of the royal merit. Ill-natured people said all the birds were recaptured in the next room and appeared again for the next display of charity. But of that I can say nothing. Each house with its ground is surrounded by a rude fence, more or less substantial. according to the character of the district, where there are many tigers or ill-doers, and especially north of Mandalay, where formerly the Kachins might swoop down in any night. This is made very high and strong, and is further rendered effective by a formidable array of sharpened bamboos. Excerpts, except when where the British have taken the matter in hand, the village roads are simply places where the jungle is kept from growing. There is no attempt at meddling. In fact, there is no material for that purpose. In some pretensions villages, indeed, in some pretentious villages, indeed, there is a raised path formed of bricks set on edge, and about 3 feet broad. There is regarded as a public work of great value and a distinction to the inhabitants of the place. It usually leads to the monastery. In many villages, however, it would be impossible to move about during the rains without some such contrivance. The mud would be too deep, and logs are slippery even to bare feet. Swinging by a couple of ropes. Yeah, this is very anthropological. Yeah, this whole book is like going into great detail about every aspect of their lives. Although the parts about Buddhism are really interesting. Um, well, I probably won't get to that this today, but tomorrow the next time I read will be about the monasteries and the noble order of the Yellow Robe and the ladder of existence. Oh, and we also get to the origin story according to Burmese mythology. So we'll cover the origin story today. Uh, but the next day I read will probably be more about Buddhism. Swinging by a couple of ropes from the roof hangs in the center of the house a rude basket made snug with a blanket or some old clothes. This is the baby's cradle, and the mother may often be seen sitting by its crooning and gently swaying it backwards and forwards. Some of the lullabies are very clever. I have tried to give a version of one of the most popular with as near as an approach to the meter and as practicable. It is it is sung to the favorite Tedat air. I don't know what that means. It is sung to the favorite Tedat air. Whatever. Title is Sain Ni La Yang. I'll sing it for you. I'll try to perform it for you. Clouds in heaven, bright as leaven, dyed with rosemary diamonds light, did the 9 gems stud your white hems. Oh, this is long. Silver moonbeams cast their chill gleams, but to make black darkness vanish, sweet sleep from my babe's eyes banish. Fairies wailed him, dreams beguiled him, in his cradle wrapped so snugly, cradle carved with Naya's ugly, carved with gnats and kings and princes, every splendor that evinces royal state and princely usance. There he slept, when what a nuisance comes the light to affray and scare him back to home from elfin land. Sweet my babe, your father's coming. Rest and hear the songs I'm humming. He will come and gently tend you, rock your cot and safe defend you. Mother's setting out his dinner. Oh, you naughty little sinner! What a yell from such a wee thing! Couldn't be worse if you were teething. My sweet round mass of gold, now please do what you're told. Be quiet and good. Be nice boys should, as nice boys should. Oh, you plague nasty brat! I must call the great big cat. He will come and squeeze and bite, scratch and eat you up outright. Puss, 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 you great big pussy. Here's a boy so nice and juicy. Let the mice have one nice night's pleasure. You shall eat him at your leisure. Nasty, nasty, noisy boy. If the cat won't, gnats will maybe come and pinch and punch and rend you. If they do, I won't defend you. Oh, now, please do not tease. Do be good, as babies should. Just one tiny little while. Try to sleep. Try to or try to smile. Sorry, try to sleep or try to smile. My prince, my sweet gold blood, my son, ordained a regal race to run. Listen to your mother's coaxing. Listen to the song good folks sing. When a little boy, when little boys make such a noise, comes the brownie on wings downy, comes the wood spirit, comes the wood sprite. In the dark night, witch and warlock, mere and torfolk, kelpie nicker, quick and quicker, gobble all bad babies up. Mercy, what an awful squall! Don't you love mamma at all? Where's your father? Fie for shame! He could quiet you if he came, but he won't. He lolls and smokes. With the neighbors cracks his jokes. He's just as bad as you, Tate. Tate, according to the consent of the Burmese nursery, is the typical bad boy. Okay. Um, but he's just as bad as you, Tate. Plagues poor mamma and stays away. Now I tell you, this to quell you. Both shall rue it, thus I'll do it. Neither shall have any dinner. You no sweet milk, he no meat ilk, he no meat ilk. You be good whether when you are thinner. The it says you'll be good when you are thinner. Um, the king alone you dread on earth. The wise man said it at your birth. Said that all the stars would love you, none on earth should be above you. But I'm sure that in the palace princes never shriek for malice. Now I'll sing the 80 ditties known in all the royal cities, lullabies so soft and drowsy, ane the gnats so could not rouse ye. Hush, my baby, my prince, my treasure, list the poppies, slumberous measure. Okay, that's it. All right. Well, that was kind of nice, actually. I'm impressed with how they were able to convert all that to English and still make it sound pretty good. Uh, yeah, I'm sure it sounds way better. This is a really long rhyme. It's got like I could. I think if it was shorter, I would have. I tried. I would have tried a little bit harder, but I was kind of overwhelmed by the length. It's kind of like, and then it kind of bleeds on to the last page too. But right there, it starts. But well, I don't really feel like rereading it, but it's pretty cool. Maybe I'll refer to that again. I don't know. I've never sung a nursery rhyme to a child, so you're almost still a child. Too bad. You've grown up. So this is about the earth and its beginning. The Lord Buddha cared very little for speculations or theories as to the construction and extent of the terrestrial globe, or as the size and the motion of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Shin Gautama was entirely a moral philosopher, concerned with the workings of the mind, whose highest aim was to despise the matter and free itself from such trammels in the progress toward Nibbana. Nibbana is not enlightenment. What's it called? Nirvana? I don't remember. Is essentially like the end goal of all the resurrections in Buddhism. That's what the book said, at least. I don't really remember where it said that though. Anywho, progress towards Nibbana. The consideration of natural phenomena was therefore entirely outside the province of the true sage. It is probable, therefore, that the transmogrified Hindu system, which does duty for Burmese cosmography, was elaborated rather by Buddha's disciples rather than by himself. It has been altered only to suit Buddhistic religious views, with here and there the fancies of a lively imagination thrown in, but the outline of it existed before Prince Thedat came. The Burmese are therefore certainly not responsible for it, but as some knowledge of the system is necessary for the comprehension of various superstitions, phrases, and forms of speech, it may be desirable to give a slight sketch of these astronomical and cosmical theories. The word "laka" means a whole revolution of nature. The world is being constantly destroyed and reproduced, but each laka lasts an incalculable length of years. It is divided into 4 periods, and it is not till the arrival of the 4th period that man appears on earth. During that, the last period, divided into 64 andrakapos. During that last period, divided into 64 andracaps. The life of the man must in each andracap wax from 10 years to an athinkaya, and then gradually wane to 10 years again, on account respectively of the merit and demerit of the world. We are now in the waning term of the 11th Andrakap. The Buddhas only appeared upon earth during the waning session of man's life, chiefly, of course, to stay the increasing influence of evil by preaching the law, and also because when man's life is slowly lengthening to an athinkaya, he is not so disposed to listen to their teachings. 100,000 years before the destruction of the world, the Devas came down from the 6 blissful seats and wander about the earth with disheveled hair and mournful garb, proclaiming that the sad tidings of the impending destruction of the world. Once again, 100 years ago, before the cataclysm, they come, and all mankind strives to raise itself beyond the influence of the destroying element. The world must be destroyed in any case, but there are 3 great principles of demerit which determine by what means the catastrophe will be effected. Concupiscence is the most common and the least heinous of these principles, and the world of the lustful will be destroyed by fire. Next comes anger, a more grievous sin than concupiscence. And the world ruined by the principles of anger will be destroyed by water. Worst of all, the sin of ignorance. The world of the ignorant will be scattered about the bounds of space by a mighty rushing wind, which, beginning so gently as barely to sway the leaves and flowers, will end by breaking up with its irresistible force the vast bulk of Mount Myanmar and the Sekyawala circles of hills. Of 64 worlds, 56 are destroyed by fire, 7 by water, and 1 by wind. Fire reaches to the 5th seat of the Rupa, the beings called perfect. Water mounts higher by 3 seats to the 8th of the Bhyamas, and wind 1 seat beyond this. Out of the 31 seats of the world, there remains therefore only 11 undestroyed. The 4 states of punishment, the abode of man, the 6 blissful seats of gnats, the 5, 8, or 9 of the lofty dwelling of the Rupa, according to the destroying agent, are altogether overwhelmed and dispersed throughout space. The 7 highest seats of the Bhyamas and the 4 of Arupa, where dwell the immaterial who have broken all ties with the material world, are right. For Neban, these 11 seats only remain constantly undisturbed. Then there is chaos for an Athinkaya. When that mighty season has passed, rain begins to fall again throughout infinity. Fire, water, or wind may destroy the world, but water alone can reproduce it through both the sun, the wind, have minor parts to play. The drops gradually increase in size till they reach the volume of 5, 10, and 100, even 1,000. The wind blows the water together in the spot occupied by the last world. A greasy scum gathers on the surface. The action of the sun gradually hardens this into a crust, which eventually assumes the exact appearance and shape of the last world. The Buddha himself it is written, did not know which was the first world and which would be the last. Many learned writers say that there is neither a beginning nor an end to the production and destruction of worlds. It will go on forever like a great wheel, even as the great wheel of the law itself. Uh, since sorrow then is shadow to life, how shall all beings strive to escape from the vortex of existence? In the Abhidhamma, we read that there are two descriptions of worlds called Thanya Kaba and the second being Athanya Kaba, that is to say, worlds to which Buddhas came and those to which they did not. Some think the latter kind of worlds must have been uninhabited. However, that may be. It is certain that the law has always existed. It existed kalpas and mahakalpas before the first Buddha came to this earth. The Buddhas only revived the knowledge of it among creatures upon the painful ladder of existence. Our present world called Bada, had been particularly favored already. Four Buddhas have appeared, and when the dispensation of Shingatama shall have passed away 2,500 years ago, hence there will come again another Arimadaya, whose statues will exceed the highest mountains in all the southern islands. The system of the world, as explained by the Buddhist Yahandas, is somewhat different from that adopted by Western men of science. In the center is the Myanmar Tong, Mount Meru, the highest peak of all the world. Its shape is somewhat peculiar, like a cask floating end upwards in water. A height of 84,000 yuzanas above the sea is counterbalanced by as many of depths below the surface. It is supported on 3 feet supported on 3 feet each, a huge ruby of carbuncle. In the space between these feet dwell the Authura, the gnats who were tempted to drink by new arrivals in the seat of Takita, and when overcome by the liquor, were hurled into the sea by their crafty rivals. At various heights on the central mountains are arranged the 6 blissful seats of the Devas, but many of them dwell elsewhere. Thus, for example, the sun, the moon, and most of the stars and planets are simply gorgeous dwellings of gnats. Away in the Empyrean, rising perpendicular one above the other, are the 16 seats of Rupa, where the Byamas, the perfect, dwell. These have got rid of almost all of the passions, but especially of concupiscence. It is not till they have freed themselves from all the affections for matter and material things that they can pass beyond to the incalculable heights of the 4 seats of Arupa, where the immaterial dwell in a state of sublimest contemplation, waiting only for the moment when they shall pass beyond into Nibbon. Down below the earth, in a mass of hard rock, are 8 great hells and the numberless smaller ones, surrounding the Myanmar Tong, and girdling round the earth are the 7 ranges of Sakyawala mountains, with 7 seas interposed in the sea round about Mount Myanmar. The great Thamadaya Ocean are the 4 great islands. in the sea around Mount Miamo, the Great Thamadoya Ocean, are four great islands: Atayakuru to the north, Piaupawideha to the east, Apagawayan to the west, and Zampudipa to the south. In the southern island dwells the race of man. Each of the great islands have 500 smaller ones round. Round about it. And in these islands dwell the English and the other nations of that other than the Buddhists and the Indian heretics. The Thamadaya Sea is too stormy to allow of any one passing from one of the great islands to any other. The southern island is the largest and is shaped like a trapezium. The western island is like the full moon. The northern is square, and Piapawideha, which is the eastern one, is shaped like the moon in her quarters. The shape of the head of the different inhabitants follow the shape of the islands, and the different sides of Mount Meru give their different colors to each island. Thus, the eastern island is all white from being opposite to the silver face of the mountain. The western is green because on that side Myanmar is of glass. The northern island glitters like gold, and the southern is pale, colored brown like carbuncle. Each island is named from the great tree which grows upon it, and forms the sacred insignia of the island. Thus the southern island is named from the Zampu tree. The Great Eugenia. The eastern and western and northern islands are very pleasant to dwell in, but especially the northern. There the people live to the age of 1,000 years, and always appear to be no more than 18. In the other islands they only live to be 500. In other respects, the northern island is a regular land of cocaine. The fabled Padetha Bin, elsewhere only found in the happy countries of the gnats, grows there. From its bounteous branches hang the most gorgeous dresses of every variety of color, and the happy islanders have only to take them off, nor are they at any necessity to till the ground to procure themselves food. From this tree they obtain also an abundant supply of a most excellent kind of rice, already husked to the hand. All that they have to do is to place it on a certain large stone, and it is forthwith cooked, and upon the branches of the tree round about appear the most dainty meats. Truly the northern islands have a most enviable existence. But in the one respect, like the inhabitants of the eastern and western islands, they are unhappy. They are always borne back to the same island. They cannot raise themselves in the scale of being like the otherwise sorrowful southern islanders. Only in Zampudipa do the Buddhas appear to teach the law and free the people from the constant deaths and reappearances. From Tahingaya, the first Buddha, to Shingatama, under whose dispensation we now live, there have been 28 Buddhas, and all of them have come to the great southern island, to Biyamas, to gnats, even to animals, and the agonished dwellers in the lowest hells. The blessed words have come, but never to those other dwellers in the islands, on the great sea Thamadoya. Thus are men enabled to attain to the state of gnats, to pass through the seat of Rupa and Arupa, until finally freed from passion and sorrow and trammels of matter, they sink into the bliss of Nibbon. Therefore have pious writers of old called the southern islands Neba's Ferry. Down below the earth, in the deepest recesses of the southern islands, are the eight great hells, surrounded by 40,040 smaller ones. Sheesh, that's a lot of hell. Four of the great hells are called Awi Dizzy, and in addition to the other tortures, terrible flames leap from the walls to wall across the mount of the monstrous space and extend on all sides beyond for 1,000 yuzanas. The other four are called La Cantie, and there instead of flames we find hideous cold. A day in any of these places of torment is as long as thousands of mundane years. The world having been created, is as yet uninhabited. Our present earth, Bada, has people in the following way from the seats of Zan, to which the destructive element had not reached, came down certain Biyamas, some say, at many as 9. Holy people, as they are, and freed from all passions, they exist at first like Adam and Eve, in a state of perfect bliss and innocence. They were not as the Kama, the generations being of the 4 states of punishment and 7 states of happiness, that of man and the 6 seats of gnats, but like Adam and Eve. They fell into sin and thence into misery. First we read that they prayed for light. We may imagine that already their spiritual light had forsaken them, for in answer to their prayers appeared the sun, the moon, and the stars. The holy people had hitherto lived on a favored earth, which, however, driven away by their growing desire for matter, vanished and gave place to another species of food, a sweet creeping plant called padalata. This was perfect in order, in odor, and flavor. But still, the appetites of the people grew, and the padalata was taken away, and in its place appeared the thale san, a peculiarly fine kind of rice, which grew ready husked and had been only to be put in a pot when it would be cooked, and then it would cook itself. But by eating the thale rice, the Biyamas became more and more gross, until, like Adam and Eve, after eating the apple, they attained a knowledge of good and evil, and marriage was instituted. After this, After this, Thale San became more and more scarce. At first, no matter how much was eaten at night, the portion which had been cut during the day reappeared. But when the first people fell into the sin of lust, the rice gradually vanished. When the rice was cut in the morning, there remained a bare patch at night. Since then, man has had to labor and earn his bread with the sweat of his brow. Owing to the scarcity, crime first appeared in the world. One man, fearing that his stock would not last him, went and stole from his neighbor's barns. Thus, theft was the first crime committed in the world. The man whose rice was stolen at first only scolded the thief and let him go. The robber, however, did not care for this and came back a second and third time. The third time he was seized and beaten. Thus, out of the original crime of thievery arose abuse, revealing assault, falsehood, and then punishment. In this way did crime and consequently law and justice take their origin, and have lasted since the very beginning of the world. Hitherto, on account of the unhappy state in which the people had lived without crime and without punishment, everyone had been equal, and there had been no necessity for marking different grades. As however crime increased, and with it revenge more or less, sweeping according to temperament, the people took counsel together and resolved to appoint a man to be ruler over them, who should regulate their affairs and punish wrongdoers. Thus a king was first appointed, and his revenue was derived from the tithes given by the people. Each man set apart a tenth of his thele san for the support of the king. The tithe system was kept up among the Burmese, the most direct in descent from the original people until a few years ago. The kings extended the system, though rulers and governors of provinces received in place of salary the tithes of the districts which were under their charge. But King Mindan Min, finding that with unscrupulous men the method was liable to abuse, abolished the system of tithes and introduced introduced the English method of paying a regular salary. It did not, however, work well. Paying a regular salary, I'm sorry, it did not, however, work well. Many of the Mio Sas, finding that they did not receive their money regularly from the state, continued to exact tithes, before only secretly, and with many cunning devices to hide what they were doing. It is probable, therefore, that the custom of the ancients would have been reintroduced. The appointment of a ruler to punish crime was therefore the second source of the law, and the first source of the administration of justice. The first king chosen was Paya Long, a person destined in future ages to be a Buddha, and therefore a great sanctity and wisdom, and one who strictly conformed to the five natural and religious laws incumbent on all men, namely not to murder, steal, commit adultery, drink fermented liquors, or speak falsely. From these immediately sprang the four Thinghas, or kingly laws, and the first laws laid down to the Payalam were with regard to the 25 descriptions of theft, the 10 kinds of assault, and the 27 kinds of abusive language. Notwithstanding institution of a source of administrative justice, crime continued to increase, and those who wished to escape from its evil influences, retired to the jungles, and there built small houses for themselves, or gained a living by begging from village to village. Thus rose the caste of the Brahmins. Those who built themselves houses and acquired wealth by agriculture and trade were called the Thatse Thu Ki We, or rich men, while those who were unfortunate and oppressed sank into a state of poverty, who were called Thu Sin Ye. Thus arose the legal classification of the people. The first king, Mahathamada, as he was called, probably had a written code, but it has since been suspended or lost. The laws which now guide us were drawn upon by Menu, originally a cowherd, not a coward, a cowherd, but afterwards a minister. To these laws all others owe their existence, for reread that in Greece, the earliest civilized country in Europe, Menu was styled Minos in Crete, and first gave them laws. In this way, polity was established in the southern island. The original people soon greatly increased and multiplied and dispersed themselves, not only all over the mainland, but some even went to the smaller islands, round about, as did the English to the Piegui. Just as the children of one father take different names, so the different people took themselves different titles according to the part of the earth they settled in. Just also as some children in a family are good and some are bad, so a few races preserve the sacred law. Here we go. Law of the Lord Buddha, and some fell away into lamentable heresies. Many of them still retain reminiscence of the teachings of the great master. Thus, the Bible of the Christians contains moral precepts in a great measure identical with the sentiments conveyed in the thoughts of the sermons of the Lord Buddha. There is even confirmation in the mention of the ages of Methuselah and other men of old, of the doctrine of waxing and waning terms of human life. Some learned Sadhawas have held that the Lord Jesus is Dewadat, and the cousin of Shingatama, who was always trying to overthrow the good work of the Buddha, and it is well known that the Siamese speak of the evil Dewadat as the god of Europe and the causer of all the evil in the world. This opinion is not, however, generally held, and the best thing as a Burman can wish for a good Englishman is that in some future existence, as a reward of good work, he may be born a Buddhist, and if possible, a Burman. For that, the Burmese are most nearly descended from the original holy people. Their name, Biama or Bama, evidently shows, while no other nation preserves the sacred law more carefully and more exactly in its form, as it came from the lips of the Buddha himself. Moreover, the Burmese monarchs retain the titles given to the Mathamada, the first king and his immediate successors, and therefore they rank above all others. All right. So I'll cut it. Thank you for watching. Sit around and think a bit. That was interesting. Some racism in there, and what else? There was a little bit of like center of the world stuff where almost everybody does this, right? But it's interesting that they say that like their laws and their system of government is, like from Buddha himself. I don't know if other Buddhist countries do that. So, all right. I'm going to end the stream here. So, see ya.